I'll call to order the Monday, July 18th, 2011 informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Welcome to all of our guests here at Carnegie and those that are viewing us on the internet or on Channel 16. We'll begin our meeting today with City Council staff report. Deborah Owen, our City Clerk and Chief of Council Operations.
Thank you and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. If I could just recap, last week on Thursday, Councilmember Dean Karski and I attended the 2011 Elected Officials Workshop from the South Dakota Municipal League, and there we listened to Dean Dayton from the Department of Legislative Audit, Secretary of State's office, along with our Attorney Generals about open meetings, and Human Resources, Lori Grunland from the City of Pierre, Jim Fry from LRC, and then also always liquor licenses and the changes that have been made to those. But it was a great meeting. It was very long and very well attended by a number of elected officials across the state. One good note in terms of bills that were adopted and that are now in effect regarding liquor licenses is down the road, those annual renewals that are done or are voted on by the council under the regular agenda now can be moved to the consent agenda if there's no issue with those. So it could be just done, again, with one vote under the consent agenda, as the annual renewals are just that. And then in addition to tonight's agenda, if you will, I know we like to print those and go green and print those on duplexed. Today we could not, so we apologize for that if you've noticed that already. But for tonight's agenda, on item 11, there are a number of amendments. Those are available online with comments from the police department about those, and also in your red notes for the motion and second tonight on each of those that have been worked through by that committee. And then also number 14 is a request to defer that by the applicant. There are notes in your red notes about that. That is from the planning department. And so a request to defer to set the date of hearing for August 1st, and then the second reading would be on August 15th. Those are the only changes to your agenda that I'm aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Owen? If not, we'll have a report from Councilor Anderson Jr. on last Monday's Public Service Committee meeting.
Okay, on that meeting, there was a review of revising the Health Department's ordinances dealing with 14-day notice requirement and issuing nuisance violations. We had the Assistant City Attorney, Paul Bangford, testify at this, also Luann Ford, the Public Health Manager. Motion was made by Councilwoman Aguilar, and the motion did pass to move this to the City Council.
Any questions for Councilor Anderson Jr.? Thank you. We are going to have a fiscal committee meeting following this meeting. Councilor Brown, would you like to say anything about that?
This is a special meeting we're having dealing just strictly with the contract authorization. So the committee members and non-committee members would welcome your input.
Thank you. Council open discussion. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring forward today? Councilor Brown?
Just one item, and I don't have the exact dates yet, but in August, South Dakota Municipal League has its policy setting meetings. So department heads and council members, if you know of legislation that we need to be considering for changes in peer, be thinking about that and bring those forth in August to those policy committee meetings. But now is the time to begin to evaluate what changes we need.
Thank you. Councilor Karski.
Just to follow up on what Ms. Owen said, we were at the meeting last Thursday, and I learned a lot. It was an elected officials meeting, and I appreciate Sioux Falls' membership in the South Dakota Municipal League. I think it's an investment well spent, and it was very good informational meeting, and appreciate the opportunity to be there.
Thank you. Any other council open discussion? If not, we'll go to today's presentations, and if you'd all please note, we're going to start with item B, Event Center Bond Financing and Operating Budget Presentation by Director Turbach.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council. Tracy Turback with the Finance Office. Before I begin my presentation, I want to thank Councilor Karski for the plug for the South Dakota Municipal League. I couldn't agree more with his assessment of the value of the city's membership in the Municipal League. I think most of you are aware of it, but I am the current president of the league, and I'm a big supporter and a big fan, obviously, that the elected officials workshop is just one of many educational opportunities for elected and appointed officials that occur throughout the year, so I'm glad you were able to take advantage of that. Okay, today's presentation, as promised, I want to provide a brief recap of what you've heard already, what some of the members of the public or media may not have heard yet, and as well put a little more meat on the bone in terms of the bond issue that we would plan to sell if we receive a favorable, or should say maybe when we receive a favorable vote from the public on this project, as well as report the results of the operating budget study that's been undergoing. I mentioned that to you last time, a couple weeks ago when I was before you. This is a project that the CPA firm of Ide Bailey has been assisting us with, along with the help of our two facility managers for the arena and the convention center, being SMG and Global Spectrum. We'll let you know what the expected operating results for the facility will be, as well as some of the major components of the operating budget and the risks as well to that operating budget. And lastly, I want to touch on the use of the entertainment tax to review some of the current uses of the entertainment tax revenues and discuss future uses under consideration in accordance with the plan that we've put together. So, by way of a recap, you may get tired of hearing me say this before we're through with this, but I think it's important because I'm still hearing on occasion people say that they're concerned that their taxes are going to go up, that property taxes are going to go up because of the event center project, and I think it bears repeating again and again and again that the plan that we've put together does include no new taxes and no increases to existing taxes, whether they're sales taxes or property taxes. There will be no new property taxes and no new sales taxes to pay for this project, no new taxes of any kind. Furthermore, the taxpayers will not be asked to pay any more than they're already paying under the current tax structure in the city to fund this project. The project will be paid for entirely within the revenue streams from our existing taxes that are currently in place. So that's really, I think, the bottom line, or a bottom line that I'm hoping the public will understand, and we will continue to say that again and again so that people aren't left misinformed about how this project will be paid for. In addition, we don't use property taxes or first penny sales taxes for the project, for construction, or for operations. Those are the driving revenue streams that support our general government services that we provide, and we're not going to impede those revenues or encumber those revenues at all for the event center project. The first penny sales tax and the property taxes at the city levy go to fund day-to-day operational services for public safety services like police and fire, for street maintenance, snow removal, libraries. All of those services are provided with the first penny sales tax and property taxes. And again, none of those revenues will be used for the event center. Furthermore, we don't depend on private funding to fund the construction of the event center facility, nor will we depend on private funding, nor will we depend on entertainment tax revenues to fund the construction of the event center facility. And once again, the plan does not in any way utilize general tax dollars from property taxes or first penny sales taxes for construction, for debt service, or for operational costs. We believe we've put together a flexible financing plan, and that's, I think, a key element of the plan that we have put together. We've focused on maintaining financial flexibility as we go through the remainder of the planning process for the project and as we lead up to an election. It's flexible. Primarily, the goal was to maintain flexibility to provide the necessary resources to fund the ongoing operational budget, and we'll talk more about that as we go. There are really two key features that make the plan, that allow us to achieve the flexibility that we're looking for in this plan. First is to dedicate the private funding to the operating budget. So those dollars that we anticipate generating from naming rights, sponsorships and advertising, premium seating revenues from suite leases, loge seating, or club seating, those revenues will be dedicated for the operational budget. And that allows us some considerable flexibility in terms of the long-term financial outlook for the Event Center project. Additionally, using the entertainment tax revenues that will become available by paying off the Pavilion and Convention Center bonds to support the capital requirements for the arena, and to provide a backstop or a fallback, if you will, to help cover the capital requirements for a new event center and potentially the operating budget for the event center as well. So we've got contingencies to back up the plan that I think provide us a large degree of flexibility going forward. For planning purposes, we have been using the estimated project cost of $110 million. You've heard on a couple of occasions now that the estimate ranges from $100 million to $120 million. So for financial planning purposes, we've selected the midpoint of that range and have used $110 million in project costs to prepare our financial plans. The project funding calls for the second penny sales tax revenue bonds to be sold to finance the $110 million in project costs, with bond repayments to be made from the second penny sales tax that exists today. We've projected very moderate growth in our sales tax revenues, again, to try to maintain a conservative approach to this overall project. The annual debt service payments will be stepped up incrementally over a period of years to take advantage of the growth in our sales tax revenues, and also to take advantage of the retirement of current bonds that are outstanding, those bonds that were issued for the Convention Center and Pavilion, as well as some drainage project bonds that were issued a number of years ago and are being repaid with second penny sales tax dollars. Some of the assumptions that we've utilized in putting together the plan relative to the bonds themselves. Again, we've assumed $110 million in project costs. We've assumed that the bonds would be issued at tax-exempt rates, which in terms of the calculations that we've made, we've utilized rates in the range of 4 to 4.5%. If we were to issue bonds today, the market is quite favorable recently, and we would be well within that range. We've estimated the payments based on a 22-year term, so we're in that 20 to 25-year time frame, and there's another level of flexibility. We could, as needs dictate, that could be shortened or lengthened to keep us within the planned expenditures for debt service costs. At 22 years, we would anticipate the first 2 years being interest-only payments and allowing a couple of years' time for our sales tax revenues, another couple of years of growth, and then we would have 20 years with principal and interest payments. The $110 million, or excuse me, the proceeds of the bonds would go to pay the $110 million in project costs, including completion of the design work, construction of the building itself, as well as the parking improvements in the vicinity of the event center, other infrastructure improvements, and furniture, fixtures, and equipment to fully equip the event center. In addition to the project costs, there are other costs of issuing the bonds and creating a debt service reserve. And it's important, I think, to understand that a debt service reserve is something that's very commonly done and established when revenue bonds are issued. These are funds that are set aside from the proceeds of the sale of the bonds and put into a trust account. They remain an asset of the city. That's cash there that's available to make bond payments. Typically, it will sit there and earn interest, and that interest can be used to go toward bond payments as well. And typically, that money is then, at the end of the bonds, is used to make the final bond payment. So it's not really money we intend to spend, but it is money that helps us to get a better rate when we sell the bonds by establishing that debt service reserve fund. I want to talk a little bit now about the amount of the bond payments that we're anticipating and to try to address the issue of affordability. I know that's one question on many people's minds, is how can the City of Sioux Falls afford this project? And as I mentioned, the debt service payments will be stepped up incrementally to take advantage of the annual revenue growth as well as the retirement of prior bonds. And you can see here the bond payments are anticipated or estimated at $4.2 million in 2012 and ramping up over the 5 years of our 5-year plan. And in 2017, through the balance of the term of the bonds, it would be at $9.5 million. Again, those prior bonds that will be paid off, the Convention Center and Pavilion bonds, will be retired in 2014, and the storm drainage bonds will be retired in 2017. So that's the reason that in 2017 we can afford to ramp that payment up as much as we do. I think it's maybe an underemphasized fact that the City of Sioux Falls has no general obligation debt, and that's really, I think, a remarkable thing for a city of our size to be able to say that we have no general obligation debt, and it truly adds significantly to the city's overall financial strength, particularly when the city finances are considered by bond rating agencies. They will look at that and see that as a real sign of financial strength on the part of the city. When we talk about affordability, it can be difficult to analyze what's affordable simply because of the subjective nature of the concept of affordability. What's affordable to me may not be affordable to you, or our opinions may differ about what is affordable for the city. Nevertheless, there are a number of ways that we assess the affordability of making bond payments such as these. We include looking at retirement of existing debt, as I've mentioned a couple times already. We look at other demands on the revenue stream that we plan to use to make our bond payments. We look at coverage ratios as an indicator of the ability for the city to afford those payments, as well as bond rating agencies' opinions of the city's financial strength. And historical revenue growth is also an indicator of what's affordable for our community. In terms of revenue growth, I mentioned a moment ago that the projections that we've used are relatively modest, but I will say that some have questioned whether 3% is being overly aggressive, 3% growth in 2011 and 2012, whether that's unrealistic or being overly optimistic. So I asked my staff to put together a graphic showing the long-term historical trend for our second penny sales tax revenues. 1985 was the first true year of full collections for the second penny sales tax, and you can see in the 25 years since, it's grown very steadily. In 25 years, the average, and that's since 1985 through 2010, the average annual growth has been 6.9%. And you can see that there was only 1 year in the last 25 when revenues from the second penny actually declined from the prior year. There were a couple times, as you can see in this line graph, when there have been slow periods when the growth wasn't as strong as the average, and those slow growth periods lasted maybe a couple of years before the pace picked up again and held up that 6.9% annual average. I think this is tells a remarkable story about the growth of revenues from this source, as well as the underlying growth of the community and the economic strength of the Sioux Falls community. It shows a remarkably steady, strong growth over a very long period of time. Another measure of affordability, particularly talking about the second penny, the ability to make bond payments from our second penny sales tax revenues, is to look at what are the demands on that revenue stream. And this chart provides a perspective on the portion of second penny sales tax revenues that would go toward bond payments. I want to take a few minutes and explain what this chart is telling us. The bars indicate the revenue from that second penny sales tax projected out for the next 25 years, assuming a 3% annual growth rate. And remember, a moment ago, I told you the 25-year average is 6.9%. But if we assume going forward it is only going to grow at 3%, those bars indicate what those annual dollar amount in revenue would be, starting at about $45 million this year and growing in 2036 to about $95 million. The light blue segment on the very bottom of each bar represents the current principal and interest payments that we're making with our second penny sales tax revenues. So those are for other existing bonds that are out there, or state SRF loans in some cases, that we're making long-term principal and interest payments. And you can see it makes up a relatively small portion of the overall revenue from the second penny sales tax. The dark blue portion of the bars is the estimated principal and interest payments on the event center bonds. So you can see the two combined in those years where we have light blue and dark blue. That would be the total amount of debt service principal and interest payments that we'd be making from our second penny sales tax revenues. Left over then would be the orange portion of the bar, and that's what the amount of second penny revenues that would be available to pay other capital costs for street projects, park projects, and so on. The overall debt service payments, including the currently existing and event center bonds, peak in about 2017. They drop off slightly then in 2018 and remain flat for a number of years through about 2026, when they decline gradually again for several years, and with all bonds being paid off by the year 2033, just 22 years from now. So I think this chart really goes a long ways toward demonstrating the affordability of making the payments, the bond payments on the event center bonds. Another measure of affordability that we like to look at is the per capita amount of debt that the city has in comparison to other municipalities. This chart shows on the left-hand side the per capita debt in a number of our peer communities, as well as our own per capita debt amounts without the event center, and on the right-hand side where we would be with the event center. You can see the Sioux Falls is currently at the bottom at $1,753 per capita, and would increase to $2,414 and jump ahead of three of the communities. The rest of the communities, Fargo, Lincoln, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, and Rochester, would still exceed the per capita debt that Sioux Falls has, even after issuing event center bonds. And it's important to note that for these other cities, we haven't adjusted their numbers for any recent bond issues or any bond issues that they may be planning in the future as well. So you can see that the numbers for the other communities are the same in both columns. The last measure of affordability that I'll touch on has to do with our city's bond rating. This is perhaps the most objective measure of what's affordable for our community, and maybe in some respects one of the most relevant gauges. It tells us kind of how the experts in the bond market view, or experts on the bond market view, the city's ability to repay bond issues. And you've seen this slide before. In 2010, Sioux Falls sales tax bonds were rated by Moody's Investor Services as AA2, which is a very high rating. You can see how many categories of rating or levels of rating lie below where we currently are. And in rating the city's sales tax bonds, Moody's cited the city's strong sales tax collections, healthy local economy, solid debt service coverage, well-managed city finances, and healthy reserve levels. So they look at really every aspect of the city's financial performance and financial condition in arriving at that bond rating. To this point, the presentation is really focused primarily on funding the capital and the debt service costs associated with the Event Center project. And however, as I mentioned in my previous presentation a couple weeks ago, the long-term financial success of the Event Center will be determined not only by the amount we pay to build it or how we finance that construction, but the long-term financial success will really be hinged and be driven by the year-to-year financial performance and the ongoing management of the facility once it is built. So that brings us to the portion of the presentation to address the Event Center operating budget. There have been two different consulting firms in the past that have studied this project. Both consulting firms concluded that the facility can operate in the black. And that's certainly reassuring to hear that read that in those reports that we have received in the past from those consultants. But we haven't just taken that at face value and gone on our merry way, assuming they were correct. The Finance Office has been working to perform our due diligence on that point in developing a projected operating budget for the Event Center. And to that end, as I've mentioned before, we engaged the assistance of the CPA firm of Eide Bailly. And they weren't just selected at random. Eide Bailly audits the City of Sioux Falls. They also audit the arena operations, and they audit the convention center operations. So they're familiar with those facilities and the business activities of those facilities as well. Eide Bailly has been working directly with the managers from SMG and Global and assisting the Finance Office in developing a projected operational budget. This engagement is now completed, and you have just today received a copy of the Eide Bailly report. We have two representatives from Eide Bailly here, Ben Ellingson, a partner, and Miranda Gallagher, one of the senior associates with Eide Bailly, are here. And in a minute, I'll have Mr. Ellingson come up and address the process that they went through in developing their report. I will point out that the report that you received from Eide Bailly, the independent accountant's report on what's called an agreed-upon procedures engagement, the procedures that they did conduct are outlined on page 1, and as it indicates on page 2, they do not express an opinion. This isn't an audit. They did not audit these projections. This is something that's in the world of CPAs is referred to as an agreed-upon procedures engagement. So it's not for the purpose of determining whether or not financial statements or financial condition or financial performance has been presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. They've really been engaged to compile the information, to make some judgment about the assumptions that are underlying the data, and follow up on those assumptions, determine whether or not there is supporting documentation for the data that the management firms have provided. So with that, I guess I'd like to have Mr. Ellingson come up and give you some of a recap on what was entailed in the agreed-upon procedures engagement.
Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Ben Ellingson, partner with Eide Bailly, and here to talk with you briefly about what the process was for this agreed-upon procedures report is and what our role in this was. So, as mentioned, it is an agreed-upon procedures engagement, not an audit. We did basically a compilation of figures that were provided to us from the current managers of the event center and the arena, or the convention center and the arena. This process started with us meeting with the management of the city to determine what the objectives and what the procedures of this report would be. And once determined, we took that to the managers and met with the managers to outline those objectives, those procedures, establish some timelines, and look at the format for the report that you've got in front of you. The managers provided the financial projections. They provided the assumptions that are detailed in Schedules 2, 3, and 4, and as well as a range for those projections. Our role in this, outside of the compilation of that data, was to review those assumptions and the data to make sure that they were consistently classified, and make sure that we gathered all the assumptions that were used for disclosure in the report. We did make some inquiries related to those assumptions, and we did also, in certain categories or in certain classifications, request and received supporting documentation to ensure that those particular figures had some supporting documentation. The manager's information was shared with us and was not shared with the city, as that is proprietary information for those managers. So it's really all from that perspective. Tracy?
Thank you, Ben. So to recap, the general process, which was completed for each of the three facilities, those three being the convention center, an arena, as well as the new event center, each of the three facilities was looked at individually, and then they were also in the report. You'll see they're combined into a campus-wide assessment of the operational budget. The process involved establishing the expected revenues and expenses for a stabilized year of operation, and in this case that was 2016. So that's the year that the numbers in your report reflect before 2016. Based on those expected revenues and expenses that were developed, then each category of revenue and expense was determined to have a certain degree of variability, and based on that variability then ranges were established for each revenue and expense category. So you will see a range for each revenue item and each expenditure item. And again, to arrive at a range within the financial results, within which the financial results would be expected to fall within 2016, and that includes accounting for inflation between now and then. This slide presents the projected operating results for the combined three-venue complex for 2016. Of course, that being, the convention center, the arena, and the event center all rolled into one financial report. It's important to understand that by combining all three facilities with this data, that the impacts, both positive and negative, of moving an event from the arena, for example, to the new event center are netted out. So we can't make the event center look good by simply assuming all the events are going to move from the arena to the event center, because there's an offsetting loss in revenue to the arena. So that was part of the reason for not only looking at them individually, but also as an entire business unit. The key, I think, was to consider the operating efficiencies when all three facilities are operated as a single business unit. I guess one other thing I'd mention about the combined results, those also remove the effects of how revenues from certain events or expenses from certain events might be allocated among the facilities. So if you have an event that uses all three facilities, it doesn't matter for purposes of this statement where you put those revenues or to which facility you might assign those costs. But as you can see, the 2016 projection for operating revenues for that three-venue facility range from $10 million to $18 million. After deducting costs of events and the operating expenses associated with those three facilities, would result in projected operating income for 2016 of $1.1 million to $2.6 million. It's important, too, to understand that the low end of the range that's presented here is not considered to be the worst-case scenario. The upper end of the range is not considered the best-case scenario. This is building off what an expected year of operations would be in a stabilized year of operations. To drill down a little more into what the major components of the revenues are, the rental of the facilities certainly is a major portion of revenue, and you'll see that in the report. Food and beverage sales comprises a significant source of operating revenue. Parking and facility fees, naming rights, sponsorships, and advertising, those are all reflected in the numbers in this report, as well as the revenues to be derived from leasing and selling premium seating for suites, loge boxes, club seats, that type of thing. Anytime we try to predict what's going to happen in the future, it's no different with financial projections. There are certain risks to those targets or to those projections. And I want to touch for a moment on some of the risks that I see in making these projections for the event center and the arena and convention center facilities. Certainly the number of events, the types of events, and attendance at the events is a risk. No one can say with any certainty, there's no guarantee how many events will be held, how many people will come to those events. That can be driven by trends in the industry. It can change with the economy. It can change with the quality of the management of the facility and the degree to which we promote it and actively seek out events to hold there. Additional risks include fee approvals. There are revenues in here for increases to fees that would be along the lines of a parking revenue from parking fees. And of course, the significant source of revenue is coming from sponsorships, the naming rights, sponsorships, suite sales. Those are dollars that we don't have commitments for, so that is certainly a risk, and that's not unusual for a project like this at this stage in the development of a project. On the expense side of the equation, major components of the operating expenses, of course, include the cost of providing the events, not the least of which are the cost of food and beverage services for the events. Personnel services, as you might expect, is a significant component of the operating expenses. Occupancy costs for the facilities, utility costs, insurance on the buildings, those things are significant costs, as well as professional services for management fees, audit, legal, those types of professional services have all been incorporated in. It's important to point out, I think, that not included in the operating expenses are additional future capital requirements that these facilities will require, whether it's for major improvements to the buildings, replacement of equipment, those kinds of costs would be over and above what's considered operating, as would major repairs and maintenance on the facilities, just as they are today. Some of the risks on the expense side of the equation, manager contracts. We don't have a contract for the event center facility at this point. Our current contracts for the arena and convention center expire at the end of next year, so those are contracts that will have to be renegotiated at some point in the future. We don't know what the terms of those contracts are today, so that is certainly something that I would put in the category of a risk. Should be no surprise. Major tenant contracts. There's also a significant risk on the expense side. We don't know what will drive those expenses. Those contracts, again, will have to be negotiated. Inflation, we've talked a number of times about that in regard to the construction, but that's also a risk when we look at the operating side of the budget as well. And then, of course, the project, the building for the event center isn't complete, the design isn't completed, and certainly the design will have a significant or can have a significant effect on what the operational cost of the facility will be. So that will be certainly in the forefront as the design is finished, to try to design it in such a way to minimize those unnecessary operational costs. And that's something where I think it's important to get input, as we have been from all the stakeholders, the current managers at the facilities. One of them may well be the manager for the new facility when the day comes. So. The last segment of my presentation today addresses the event center, the entertainment tax revenues. I want to talk a little bit about the current and future uses of the entertainment tax. By way of a review, the current revenues that we receive from the entertainment tax, third penny tax, BBB tax, call it what you want, the current revenues are used were really in two categories: debt service payments on the bonds that were issued to construct the convention center and the pavilion. As I mentioned earlier, those bonds will be retired in 2014. The second use of entertainment tax revenues is for the convention center and the Washington Pavilion to fund, assist in funding the operating budgets for those facilities, operating contracts, major repairs and maintenance to those facilities, as well as the capital needs for those facilities. So that's where the entertainment tax revenues currently go. The future use of entertainment tax revenues that we're proposing would be to, in addition to funding the pavilion and convention center costs, would be to move the arena capital requirements so that they're funded from the entertainment tax as well. These venues are some of the primary drivers of those entertainment tax dollars that the city receives, and it certainly seems appropriate to fund arena capital needs using entertainment tax dollars. By moving those from the second penny sales tax fund, those capital costs for the arena, that again will help free up a little bit more money in the second penny sales tax fund to make those, assist in making those bond payments. In addition, the future consideration for entertainment tax revenues would include operating, supporting the operating costs, major repair and maintenance, and capital investments in all of our event facilities, whether it's the arena, the convention center, the event center, Washington Pavilion, the Orpheum Theater, or even the Great Plains Zoo as it's provided for under our city ordinance. The projected operating budget, of course, for the event center indicated that there would be positive operating income from that facility and in conjunction with the arena and the convention center. But it's important, I think, and I mentioned this a moment ago, but it's important to keep in mind that these entertainment tax dollars that will be freed up when the convention center and pavilion bonds are paid off will serve as an additional layer of kind of a backstop or a fallback if those operating projections do fall short. So in summary, the overall plan to construct the event center and to fund the operations, I believe, is a conservative plan. There will be no new taxes, no higher taxes, no general obligation debt. There is none now. There will be none with the event center project. And I think we've demonstrated that the debt service payments to be made from the second penny sales tax are certainly affordable to the city with the kind of financial horsepower that the second penny sales tax brings with it. The results of the study of operating revenues and expenditures indicates that we'll have positive results from the operations of the facilities. And again, we've reserved a certain amount of flexibility for the future use of entertainment tax revenues as well. With that, I would entertain any questions you folks might have, and I know the folks from Ide Bailey are here and would be willing to answer questions as well.
Tracy, in the financing and event center, you projected moderate growth in the second penny sales tax, 3% in 11 and 12, 4% in 13 and 14, 5% in 15 and 16. Did you also model, just in case we weren't able to hit that 4 and 5% growth, say it was just pretty much a flat growth of 3%, did you do any modeling to determine the ability to make those payments and things at that?
I think that's part of the strength of having a long-term capital plan, that so that we look down the road further than just the next year. And if we are not meeting our 3% targets or 4% targets down the road, we've got time each year as we update that capital plan to reevaluate where we are and how we're doing in terms of where our capital plan had been. There is a certain degree of flexibility in terms of the financing for the event center that we can utilize to lower those estimated payments. We could go out longer than 22 years, for example, and lower those annual payments down. It would take us obviously longer to pay it off, than it would if we hold on that 22-year mark. We haven't looked at capitalizing any interest expenses either for this project, again, to try to keep the overall borrowing costs down. That's another tool that we could use to add a little flexibility if we feel like we aren't going to be able to make those debt service payments. If markets change between now and the time we sell bonds, those are things that are nice to have in our back pocket that we can utilize when the day comes to sell those bonds and lower our future bond payments for the terms. Thank you.
Councilor Karski.
Tracy, I'm sure these numbers are available to me somewhere, but help me out with what are our operating study or our operating results for just the convention center and the arena right now? Do we
currently
know those numbers?
The 2010 results, the arena ended the year of 2010 with an operating loss of about $123,000. That's after we net the ticket fees that come directly to the city. So it's set up. Not all the revenues that are generated there go into the arena fund or into the arena account. Some of those revenues come directly to the city. But if we net those out, it was the arena is surprisingly close to breaking even at this point at $123,000 in net loss in 2010. The convention center had an operating loss of about $560,000 in 2010. Okay. And those, in the case of the convention center, and as you look through your report, as you have time, you'll notice that the operating performance of the events or the convention center itself will improve, but is not projected to break even on its own. And again, some of that has to do with how you allocate revenues between the new event center and the convention center and the arena.
Have we changed that formula when we came up with this, and are we accounting for it differently, the revenues versus expenses?
No.
Okay.
No, there are assumptions made, and you'll see those in the report, that some events will move from the arena to the new event center. So the revenues associated with those events, like the sports teams, it's assumed that the hockey and the football would move to the event center. So those revenues that go along that are associated with those events are reflected in your report under the event center. That's why it was important to roll all three together. So we didn't. Nobody could accuse us of playing games with the numbers and trying to make one facility look better or worse than the other. It's really taking a holistic approach, and I think in the future, from my standpoint, it will only make sense to manage the three buildings as a single business unit and account for it that way. There's really no value gained, in my opinion, by saying, well, the old arena loses money, the convention center makes money, the event center, To me, it's, well, what's the bottom line for the entire campus out there?
I like the approach, and I agree with it. Time for one more?
One more.
Explain to me a little bit, I'm a little vague on how moving the arena capital, it was one of your last slides on the entertainment tax uses and the arena capital. How is that different from what we're currently doing?
Currently, the capital improvements for the old arena or capital equipment for the arena are funded through the second penny sales tax.
Okay.
And so by no longer utilizing second penny revenues for that and instead using entertainment tax, that will free up some dollars in the future within the second penny fund.
Would that change the operating study results? If
No,
that
wouldn't have any impact on the operating study at all.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Tracy, you said the arena lost money in 2010, the convention center lost money in 2010. Going back in history over the last 10 years, how often has the city had to add money to their budgets?
Over the last 10 years, I guess I can't answer that.
Okay.
We can certainly look that information up. I would suspect that there have been few, if any, years when those facilities have operated in the black, but I'm really just speculating.
But now we're saying that this combined, all three facilities could have an operating revenue that makes money?
It would, right, it's projected to operate in the black. When you look at all three facilities combined, well, certainly if you look at the event center as a standalone facility, if you look through the numbers, you'll see that is projected to operate in the black and far enough in the black that it will offset the operating losses projected for the convention center and the arena. And again, I can sense the skepticism in your voice Counselor, but it's not all that unusual for facilities like this to operate in the black. Look at our arena. It maybe doesn't operate in the black, but it's also a 50-year-old facility that's very inefficient to operate. But we have, in addition to the work that Eide Bailey and SMG and Global did on the operating study, we also benchmarked the results that you see in that report with other facilities. The facility in Trust Bank Arena down in Wichita, the Fargo Dome, the Quest Center in Omaha, those facilities all operate in the black as well. So, I mean, it's not unheard of for that to happen, and I don't think in a market our size with a new facility and a quality management team on board, I don't see any reason why it can't operate in the black.
May I ask another?
One more.
Okay. So just so I understand, the total cost to operate, if you add up the less cost of events and operating expense, $9.5 million to $16.4 million, is that correct? That's the operational cost range?
Right. Yep, those two things combined, and it's apparently customary in the industry to split out cost of events with from operating expenses. Those two numbers would be the total operational budget for the facility, the combined facilities.
Further council questions? Councilor Jameson.
Tracy, did you say 4 or 4.5% would be the interest rate?
That's what we use
Project
to
could be the,
make our calculations, right?
and over the 22 to 25 years, how much interest total would we pay on that loan?
You know, we have that number. I guess I don't have that with me today, but I could certainly provide that to you. I can say that if we were to finance it over a period of, say, 30 years, I think it would be about double the cost, just like as if you take out a 30-year mortgage when you buy your home. You will, in interest costs over that course of that 30-year loan, pay about what you paid for the purchase price of your home, and I would expect that would be very, very close in this instance as well for 30 years. So by going to 22 years, we can cut that significantly.
And I know the 110 is a best bet kind of thing right now because of you don't have some of the final numbers in and there's estimates and all kinds of stuff. Does that include the contingency amount as well?
Yes.
So if we borrowed the amount, we'd have to borrow the contingency, and that would be 110.
The
Right.
110 total project cost that we've been working with includes contingencies for construction. Yep. So that's included.
Okay, and then
Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I had it right. Then as well, the entertainment tax brings in $2.5 to $3 million. Is that right a year?
No, it's closer to right around $5 million from the entertainment tax.
Okay, the rest is obligated for the payments. That's why there's only 2.5.
There's
Where am I
currently
coming up
about
with?
$2.25 million in entertainment tax revenues going to pay the convention center and pavilion bonds.
How much did you say again?
About 2.25, I believe.
The total revenue is 5.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other information that you're going to give us regarding the financing and or proposed financing of the event center?
Well, I'm sure there will be over the next 6 months. There's bound to be more information, but this is really the extent of the presentation that I have for you.
Okay.
Yeah. If there are other questions you have, today or in the future, I would invite you to send me an email or stop in my office. I'm eager to provide you with the information you feel like you need.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I have a couple. On slide 10, you show what our existing debt payments are, what the estimated event center bond payments would be, and available capital. But how does this affect our future bonding ability?
Future bonding ability?
Right. I can't believe that during that 22-year period that we're not going to be looking at doing any future bonding.
I would agree with that. That's very likely a very reasonable assumption for you to make. Now, the graphic on slide 10 presents those bonds that are being repaid with second penny dollars. And it gets a little bit confusing to try to talk about this because there are other bonds that are pledged to be paid with second penny dollars that are not. For example, the Lewis and Clark water bonds have the backing of the second penny revenues, but there's no intention and no plan to use those. So when we talk about, and what you're getting at is the debt service coverage of our second penny, and when we talk about coverage ratios or coverage amounts, normally we would include anything that's pledged or could possibly, in worst case scenario, be used to, could be repaid with second penny dollars. So I'm going to let me qualify my answer by saying that first. But if you assume that we're only going to continue to pay those bonds that we're currently paying with second penny revenues, and that the Lewis and Clark bonds are going to take care of themselves and be paid with water revenues, if you can imagine a line that goes up horizontally at that same 3% growth rate, and the council's policy is 2 times coverage, so it would be right through the middle of each one of those bars. Anything below that line would be available for future bonding capacity.
Thank you. One other question, and I don't know if you can answer this, but when do we expect to have that firmer number as far as the project cost?
I believe before the end of this week, we're expecting to receive the numbers from Mortensen on what they have estimated as their price for the project.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? If not, Councilor Brown.
If the operation side of it are to make money, 1.1 to 2.6, why do we use the sponsorship, the private dollars on that side? Why not use it on the construction side to lower the debt service?
The private funds, of course, will come in a year at a time, not all, at least under the plan. That's what we're anticipating, that we're not anticipating receiving any large lump sum payments up front. If that were to happen, we could certainly use that cash to shrink the size of the bonds that were sold. But once the bonds are sold, they're sold. Any additional revenues that come in could conceivably be used to make bond payments. As I mentioned, however, beyond the paying for the operational costs, the year in, year out operating expenses, there will be certainly, as there are with any city facility, ongoing capital needs for major improvements, for replacing capital equipment. Those dollars that are generated from a positive operating income very likely will be plowed right back into the facilities and properly maintaining and improving the facilities and replacing equipment as it's needed. But if we get beyond that and there's still money left, there's no reason why those dollars couldn't be used for to help defray the debt service costs.
Now, the construction cost is $110 million. That's the number we're using today. Does that, with the issuance of the bond, does that include covering the cost of the issuance of the bond and the reserve? And
no, the cost of issuance and the debt service reserve would be on top of the $110 million.
So how much are we going to bond for if the construction cost is $110 million?
The total bond would be somewhere around $120 million. And again, most of that extra 10, if you want to call it extra, additional $10 million would go into a trust account in the form of a debt service reserve and not be spent. It'll sit there and earn interest and be used to make the final bond payment. So,
thank you.
Councilor Rolfing.
Yes, Tracy, I noticed on slide number 18, you had parking revenue in there. Is that a change in policy of not adding that on to the ticket price, but start charging for parking then?
Well, there currently is no fee assessed that's called a parking fee. We assess, I refer to it as a facility fee. It is here. I think there's another acronym for it, and it doesn't come to mind immediately. But there's a fee that we currently assess that's added on the cost of a ticket for an event at the arena. The parking revenues that we're contemplating here would be in addition. So there would be an increase either in that existing fee or some new fee that would be added to generate additional revenues to help support the facility. Now, there are reasons not to call it a parking fee or a parking charge and simply call it a facility fee, and then it can be used for supporting any portion of the facility. But it does contemplate increasing fees for that purpose to generate additional revenue. And where do you go that you don't pay for any kind of an event that you don't pay a significant additional fee in addition to the price of the ticket? Every facility we've talked to has fees like that. And that's why I listed it as one of the risks. That would be something that would come to the council eventually for approval. And it's a risk because there's no guarantee that the council would approve that.
Councilor Jameson. And this is the last question. We need to get on to
See
the
what
next
happens when we get too
presentation.
much time on our hands? We get more thoughts. If you could switch to slide 3 and 4, or more so 3. In your conservative approach, you talk about does not use entertainment tax for construction. And then the next slide, it says a flexible financing plan. It says reserves the use of the entertainment tax for. Is that regarding operation or something?
In regard to why the event center is listed there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just for operation.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Director Turback.
Thank you.
We'll next hear on the Sioux Falls Building and Development Review Committee, and I'll call Director Cooper up to make introductions.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. As all of you are aware, each year the city is involved with millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of public and private development projects, as well as thousands of inspections that involve a number of different city agencies. And what you're going to be hearing today, I think, is very exciting. It's something that we've been looking forward to for some time, is a report on our building and development review process. And to help us walk you through this today, I'm going to introduce Keith Severson, also with Ide Bailey. This is Ide Bailey Day at the Carnegie. And it's amazing as you hear Keith's presentation along with some others. I hope you'll be impressed with all the effort and time that was put into this, the completeness of it, the objectiveness of it, and the fact that it did involve input from a number of city staff, from planning, zoning, building services, engineering, fire inspection, community development, and IT. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith and have him walk through his report with you. And then I'll be here to kind of wrap up and kind of give you an idea of where we go from here. So, Keith, welcome to the Carnegie Town Hall.
Thank you, Councilwoman, council members. It's, as Mike said, my name is Keith Severson, and I've got two, really, my first hat was as a member of the Chamber. I'm on the board of the Chamber, and last fall this task force really began last August in an attempt to address the future Sioux Falls initiatives and to review the process. So on behalf of the Sioux Falls Building and Development Review Committee, I am pleased to report to you here our report on our findings and recommendations in connection with the review of the city's development process. Obviously, I want to personally thank the members of the committee for their involvement, and also echo my thanks to Mr. Cooper and all the members of the city staff throughout planning and building services, whether it was in engineering, zoning, planning services, all of the participation that we received and the cooperation on part of this report. There really wasn't anything that we asked for that we weren't able to be provided, and it was very open and very appreciative at that part. So as part of the Future Sioux Falls initiative, which was completed last year by the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, in partnership with the city, it included an action item objective that stated, provide business-friendly processes and policies to best facilitate economic growth. And part of that effort, on page 2 of the report, it talked about consistently surveying the development community to ensure that city review processes are responsive to business concerns. Proceed with city efforts to examine government controls on redevelopment projects to ensure permitting is transparent, timely, and cost-effective. And the issue here is really economic growth. The intent was to review all the current development processes to ensure that they are adapting today's market conditions and really the trends to best facilitate economic growth. I can't emphasize that more enough. And we all love to see the next ADP project, the next big development. But the reality is Sioux Falls has a broad base of community members, our small business owners, our landowners, and everyone. And when you're going through a process, whether it's an addition to your garage or a warehouse that wants to add additional facilities, to add those 2 or 3 jobs, that's what's going to help multiply and develop and really enhance all of Sioux Falls. And as we maybe go back in years past, as before we got into the era of computers and technology, sometimes it was deemed not what you knew, but who you knew to get projects through the city process. And really it's the intent that we build on this process to ensure that it's what you know to achieve the end result. And accordingly, the committee established the Future Sioux Falls objective as its goal, yet recognized clearly in its review all the law and ordinances that we have to deal with. And this isn't about changing laws and ordinances. That's your challenge in how you adopt that and what you look at. This was really an effort to attempt to streamline the concepts, to enhance economic development, and remove what we thought were any unnecessary barriers for uses of the city and planning development department, and really the effort. And our committee, as Mike had mentioned, really invested over 350 hours of their time beginning last fall and completing this past April. So a great deal of communication between the groups. As a breakdown, you've got the listing of the members in there, but that we broke it down between commercial and apartment developers, as well as land developers and our home builders, in an effort to really review and attack all of the processes as they impact redevelopment processes, steps that really that are necessary to get that construction process through the various phases throughout City Hall. And I talk about getting a project from the initial plan, just the initial thought of where it goes, to get that building permit, but really to be able to track it all the way through to the final CO, so that we can get that thing moving. And when you talk about economic development and the growing from a contractor or a user standpoint, obviously the inspection process and the total construction phase always has impacts on our businesses as they are attempting to just complete their projects in a timely manner. And that's a big, important part of the building services and planning review, and a lot of effort was spent in just reviewing all of that. I just have a couple comments, and then I'm going to ask 2 of our task force members to provide their observations of the process as well. But I just want to really say on page 10, the committee strongly believes that the development process in the City of Sioux Falls is one of the easiest to work with in the surrounding areas. We're very lucky to be in Sioux Falls, and we're committed for that. And we applaud the city for its dedication, economic growth, and commitment to the Future Sioux Falls initiative. And really, overall, the recommendations that were provided in this report are simply enhancements to what we felt were a well-functioning development process. But no one can ever rest on their laurels, and there's plenty of areas for improvement. And I believe that's what this report really brings to your attention. So again, I want to thank the City Hall to allow us to go through this process. So at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Lloyd, representing the Sioux Falls developer and commercial side, as well as Todd Onowski, who has worked with Sioux Falls home builders, to make a few comments as well, and then I'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Craig Lloyd, Lloyd Companies. We've been in the development business since about 1972. And one of the things I always bragged about when I would go out and talk to different businesses about coming to Sioux Falls is if you want to get something through the city in a fast and orderly process, you'll never find a city faster than better to deal with in Sioux Falls. And I really believe that. And we've proved it many times, everything from Home Depot to Slumberland, different projects that we put together, like for Target. And I think the process that Keith went through with the staff and everybody that we worked with, because we got some pretty notable people here that have worked on this program, and it was fun to go through. Enjoyed the comments from the staff, because, you know, us developers, we always think that we're always right, and as Ron Bell reminds me constantly that I'm not always right, but the process I thought worked really well. Keith tried to keep developers on task, which is almost impossible, and I thought the process went very good, and so I compliment the council and the mayor for putting this task committee together, allowing me to be part of it, and I appreciate it very much.
Todd Anowski with the Home Builders Association. I would echo Craig's comments. It was a very fair process. We were delighted to have representatives from the City of Sioux Falls participate and provide us information when we were seeking various types of information at these meetings. Would also like to thank Keith for being a facilitator of this group. Keith kept us on track during this process, and as a result, we were able to put together some conclusions. We're not done yet. The plan would be to come back, I believe, in 6 months, take a look at those items again, review them with the city staff, and see what changes need to be made or improvements. And so again, I on behalf of our committee members, which, Madam Chair, if I may, there's quite a few different committee members here and groups. If it might be okay to have them stand and be recognized.
That would be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That being said, I would just ask that this is not the end of the process, and it is the intent for us to reconvene in 6 months to evaluate all the recommendations and the progress made accordingly. So I would ask if there are any questions of council.
Questions? Councilor Rolfing.
Thank you, everyone out there, for doing this. It looked, when I read through the conclusions and things on this, it looked like a daunting task when you started, I'm sure. And you've brought it down to a manageable thing, a lot of which looks like it's going to be halfway simple to implement to a certain extent for using the website and using some of the things that and Sire to get involved with. So I commend you for doing that. A couple of things. On number 6 on planning and review permitting, talks about allowing developers to pay certain fees at variable times during development rather than in advance, and waiving some fees, et cetera. How do you implement that? How do you waive these costs? And don't they have to be paid sometime?
They definitely do, and I think that's, as we looked at all those fees and some of the new platting fees, as you know, the investments, when is the economic return to them going to be?
Okay.
And so as far as you look at the project, maybe it's sometimes if you've got a plat where there's a 100-acre development, that gets absorbed over time, and that those fees would come in over time.
Okay.
And so they're just to look at flexibility in connection with development of the process.
Good. You talking under inspection and enforcement about specialty inspections due to specialties based rather than geographically based. I didn't quite get that. Can you explain that?
Want me to take that? When you look at someone who is, you may have someone in the Northeast region just taking care of all of that. In particular, they're doing multifamily, single-family, commercial development in Northwest.
Oh, they're doing
in there, and then you
Got
may
it.
have someone over in the Southeast area that's doing the same thing versus having
for code
one
enforcement. Got
right.
it.
so that
Okay.
you have commonalities in their response and understanding the inspection.
Another one, tell me about the, under appeals process, tell me about the appeals process that we have now. What does it entail?
Upon request, one can request that the appeal be had. I believe it's represented one or two times a month, and you get on the process. You then are then present your case to an independent board to address the appeal concept, and they'll make that final determination.
And the appeal board is made up of
Individuals
from the
from the community at large.
community at large.
I believe so. Would that be right, Ron?
That, okay, and that's as far as it can go?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any? Oh. I'm hearing different opinions here, so.
Each of our codes has a Board of Appeals. Those boards are appointed by the City Council, just like the Planning Commission or the
Okay.
Park Board. They're typically made up of peers of people that are knowledgeable, whether it's an electrical Board of Appeals or a plumbing Board of Appeals, that are knowledgeable in that industry. And there is, that's really the final say based on how the codes are written and adopted by the City Council. So typically, the appeal of those boards' decisions would be through the court system.
The court system.
Rather than through an administrative appeal process beyond that.
Okay.
If I could just, I think what the committee was saying to us is that we need to be more flexible with getting those boards together so that they're more readily on
Yeah.
notice, rather than a standing meeting once or twice a month, that
Right.
we could get them together maybe even in a day or 2 days' notice.
Yeah,
So
because
that we
that
don't
could really
stop a
slow up.
project,
Right,
slow
stop
down
a
a
project
project.
kind of thing. That would make sense. Yep. And, okay. We don't, when we decrease fees for appeals or that kind of thing under the appeals process, we don't publish any of that right now? So that people know what's going on with the appeals, or?
No, they don't.
Okay.
Not at this time.
But they're planning on doing that? Some of these ideas in here about publishing this stuff just make perfect sense, so that people know, hey, they say now you can't put two outlets within 3 feet of each other. I guess I better stop doing that, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And just, okay, I've got the appeals. Oh, one last question. When you talked about it, ours being one of the easiest cities and things to work with, where did you check this? I mean, did you check with Sioux City and Fargo and our comparable cities that we'll always try to compare
The
with?
comparison was really from members of the committee that have had involvement in other communities as they've looked at developments
Okay.
in just other areas around the country. So it was basically not a specific review, but just an observation of the committee as far as doing a project in Rapid City, Sioux City, other development communities around the region.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. And thanks to this group, too, for this work. This was one of those things, the introduction talks about how that last election campaign, we heard this a lot. We really did, and so I appreciate your work. A couple of things, though, that have come to my mind since I've been on the council is, number one, and I'm not seeing it in the plan review and permitting process, that idea that there needs to be one location, like a concierge. We've talked about a development concierge in terms of it still looks to me, and maybe I'm not reading this right, but it still looks to me like if I'm a developer, I need to go to several departments. I understand the technology improves, and that can help, but I still need to wade through that to a certain extent on my own. Are we thinking any more beyond that in terms of personal relationships and making that more a one-stop shop? Do you know?
I do not know. I'll let someone else defer on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Obviously, the group didn't talk about that. And then my other question is for Mr. Cooper. So thank you, Keith. I appreciate it.
I can address your first question. Yes, we have talked about that, and I know with community development, we're also talking about that in terms of economic development, particularly if we're looking at a new business that's looking at Sioux Falls that's not familiar with the landscape. Where do they start, and who can they use to kind of take them through the review process. I think that's one avenue that we can look at. Most of the local developers, whether they're large or small, the one-stop shop that we have established in City Hall is that we now have all the departments in the building. With the movement of fire inspection into City Hall, that has helped us now. We have engineering, planning and building services, fire, all in the same building. And yes, you still might have to physically go to 2 or 3 places, but with the software package that we've talked about in here, that's really going to help with that concept of a one-stop shop. And really, the communication that we heard is one of the missing links, that from the developer standpoint, they don't always know the status of their plan or their permit. And so with the software package, they'll be able to instantly know where that's at. So yeah, we are trying to work toward this concept of a one-stop shop as much as possible.
Good, that's cool. My other question then for you, Mike, is this plan is pretty comprehensive, and it's really technology-based. I'm looking at new laptops, I'm looking at new handhelds, all of those kinds of things. Do you yet, or will you have for us a timeline for when you implement each of those steps and kind of cost estimate type things?
Yes, what we want to do is over the next 6 months, we're going to put an internal team together. Ron Bell, Chief Building Services Official, we're going to lean on him to help put this together, to work with all the other city staff and really kind of prioritize the recommendations, put a timeline, who's responsible, and whether there's a cost involved of either operating budget or personnel time. So, yes, the next step for us is to put together an implementation strategy based on these recommendations.
Good, thank you. And again, thanks to the group that did this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I would now entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Madam Chair, I would move that we go into executive session for 2 reasons. One, for personnel matter pursuant to SDCL 125.2.1 and proposed litigation or contractual matters pursuant to SDCL 125.2.3.
Do I have a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. We will now go into executive session at 5:20